Hello, my name's Jenny Fox-Eads and this is a video about the work of wellbeing in schools and in education. In previous videos I've talked about the three main tools or even pedagogies that I've used to promote wellbeing in education. One being storytelling, one being traditions, rituals within school, the rhythm of life in schools, and the other being character strengths and virtues. In this video I'm going to talk more about character strengths and virtues and why and how they support well-being, the well-being of the teacher and the well-being of the pupil or student. Education is an anxious business. If education fails, quite literally society fails. Education is about passing on civilization to the next generation, and that makes it an anxious business for everybody. What the character strengths and virtues do, and my work is based on 12 years of experience and about 4 years of research with teachers and pupils. What the character strengths and virtues do is to contain anxiety. They help people to manage the anxiety that is inherent in learning so that it doesn't get in the way. So effectively, a framework of character strengths and virtues, and I use the VIA, the VIA, but there are others. But what that does is to allow for boosting courage and boosting persistence so that love of learning can actually come to the fore and flourish. One of the things that's happening is that as you use and talk about strengths, you learn to look slightly differently, you learn to see yourself slightly differently, and you learn to see other people slightly differently. You learn to see yourself and others through a lens of character strengths. Your self-concept changes. Self-concept is a sort of psychological term, and really what it's getting at is the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves. Now, from experience, I can say that what happens when you get used to these words and you used to using these words is that your self-story shifts. You begin to tell a slightly different story. One teacher whose school has used character strengths for about 10 years was telling me about a little boy, I'll call him Colin, it's not his real name, who came to the school after a lot of traumatic life events. He was very, very anxious. He could not afford to get anything wrong. He couldn't afford to be less than perfect. The school, the teachers, everyone around him was using these words all the time. He heard his teachers telling him that he had character strengths. He heard the other 6-year-olds in the school telling him that he had character strengths, and gradually he came to believe it. As he came to believe that he could show courage, that he could show persistence, even when he was making mistakes, it changed his self-story. He became someone who could survive failure, who could survive getting things wrong. Now, I have to say that when I first started working with positive psychology and with character strengths and virtues, I was worryingly like Colin. I honestly couldn't afford to make mistakes. I couldn't afford to get things wrong. As I worked with this framework, more and more I began to relax about the things I am not good at, because I became much more explicitly aware that I also can show these character strengths. And as I began to build them and think about them, I became much, much more relaxed about being able to fail, being able to make mistakes, because the foundation is a foundation of character strengths and virtues. So that's one of the reasons I think it's a good idea for teachers to think about finding a framework of character strengths and virtues to work with. My experience and my research shows me that it supports relationship. Education doesn't happen on its own, it happens in relationships. human beings grow in relationships with their earliest caregivers, and that carries on. We need other people in order to learn. When you start to see through a lens of character strengths and virtues, it supports relationships. When I first came across Seligman and Peterson's character strengths list, I thought it was a good idea to introduce into schools, but the first thing I did was test it for myself and with my family. So I learned the words. I quite literally wrote them on my desktop, looked at them a lot, and I started to use them. Because I do actually believe in testing the things that I do. What I found as I used words like friendship, like kindness, naturally in conversation, saying things like, "Thank you, that was kind. I thought that was a brave thing to do. That was a creative idea you had there." As I introduced it, it improved the quality of the relationships within the house. The other thing I noticed, which was really very exciting, was that my kids, who were teenagers at the time, didn't really notice explicitly what I was doing, but they responded to it. And also, they began to copy, they began to mirror my behaviour and my language with each other. So I would overhear my sons commenting on each other's kindness. I'd hear my daughter saying, "I thought that was really creative." They began to use the words themselves. That was the point where I decided to introduce character strengths and virtues to teachers, not because they weren't already strengths-based, because all good teachers are strengths-based, but because I felt that this vocabulary, this language, broadened and deepened our capacity to see what was good in the pupils we were working with. Particularly if you're working with challenging pupils. Challenging pupils attack our relationship with them. They attack learning because it threatens them. It threatens to take them away from what they know, from the familiar. So it's worrying, and they will attack us. When we're under attack by pupils, being able to see that actually what they're showing is something like courage. They might, in a way, be showing it too much. They may be showing a huge amount of loyalty, but it might be misplaced. But being able to frame what they're doing in terms of character strengths and virtues, even when they are really working very hard to make us dislike them, can actually thwart their attempt to make us dislike them. We can continue to see that behind the behaviour is a loving child, is a child who's desperate to actually be friends with us, but doesn't quite know how to do it. And that's what I found, that teachers under stress, teachers in very difficult teaching conditions with children really challenging them, found that this framework supported and defended those relationships. It also helped the relationships between the staff, because staff were using these words with each other as well as with the pupils. This framework of character strengths and virtues, or any other one that you choose, is going to be promoting the basis of education, which is hope. Education is a hopeful enterprise. It's about the future. It's about believing that our civilization can be passed on to the next generation, and that the next generation is to be trusted. So by using these character strengths and virtues, we're not trying to fix what's wrong with people. We are looking for what's right with them, and we're building on that. We're believing that education can and will make a difference in the world. Finally, and I'm breaking all the rules of talks here because I'm making a fourth point and I've already made 3, apologies for that. These are character strengths and virtues. There's concern in modern civilization in the West at the moment about ethics, ethical behaviour. With the decline of organised religion, where do our ethics come from? Well, the character strengths and virtues are very closely linked to the idea of virtue ethics. And they provide for me a way of working and thinking and speaking about ethical behaviour, about right and wrong, that doesn't impose an ideology on students, but invites them to talk about it and think about it for themselves. Fundamentally, what it's doing is promoting the growth of wisdom and giving students and teachers a language to have the difficult conversations that I think both parents and teachers should be having about what is right and what is wrong, and about what constitutes a good life. These resources are available from TTS, which is a UK publisher, but you can make your own. You don't have to go out and buy these. I think it is important that you have physical resources a bit like this, because when humans see things and touch things, it makes a difference to them. So whether you go away and buy these or whether you make your own, for many years I and the schools I worked with made our own, it is important to have things you can touch and see that symbolise these abstract but really important concepts that we're working with. For me, character strengths and virtues is one of the foundations for working with well-being with pupils. One of the most important things I think we do. Well worth learning, well worth making the effort, but you do need to learn it, and you do need to use it as a language. You need to learn to see people through a lens of character strengths, to see yourself through a lens of character strengths before you can see pupils and students in that way. But when you do, the quality of relationships you get will deepen and will grow. Thank you very much for listening, and in another video I will be talking about the third tool, which is traditions, rituals and the rhythm of school life and how that supports well-being. Thank you.